All right, let's get started. So welcome to another webinar by DigiShares. My name is Jonas and I'm today's host. And in today's webinar, we'll be discussing the ESG of tokenization. And for those of you who don't already know, ESG is short for environmental, social, and governance. And to help us cover this topic, we have invited industry-leading experts who will talk about tokenization and how it specifically relates to ESG criteria. But before diving into this topic, and as always, let us just briefly cover the rules of engagement. So first off, if you have a question for a specific speaker while he or she is on, please add that question to the Q&A. And please also remember to specify who the question is for. So simply type in the name of the presenter, followed by your question. And then after each presentation, if there is any time left, we can then take a few questions. And if not, we'll try to save the best for the panel at the end. And please note that sometimes if our speakers have time to spare, they'll enter the Q&A after their presentation to answer your questions. If you have any general inquiries, feel free to use the chat where our moderators will be ready to respond to them. Also, if there are any technical issues during the webinar, such as a speaker being muted or a screen being shared, not being shared, then please notify us using the chat. Okay, so having covered the rules of engagement, let us now move on to an introduction of today's presenters. First off, as always, we have Claus Skaaning, and Claus is the CEO of DigiShares, and he will, as always, be giving us a tokenization industry status update and talk about the current traction of DigiShares. Following Claus, Claudia from University of Southern California will be speaking about the ESG of tokenization. And then after Claudia, we have Peter Gaffney, the head of research and security token advisors, who will be giving us a review of the first half of the year 2022. Then after Peter, we have Noah Baalessanvu, head of technology at Savannah, who will be presenting on how to unlock blockchain and crypto for emerging markets. After Noah, we have Derek from Construo on the scene, and she'll be introducing us to a collaborative platform and marketplace for the construction industry. After Derek, we have Conor Platt, founder and CIO of Confluence Analytics, and will be speaking about the state of digital carbon, and he'll do that together with Klima, responsible for strategic partnerships at KlimaDAO. Then we have Callum, founder and CEO of Renewablox, who will speak about the ESG of Bitcoin mining. And following Callum, we have once again Claus Skaaning from DigiShares, who will be speaking about DigiShares and the ESG of tokenization. Then finally, at the end, we have Morne, Olivier, CEO of Green Carbon Token, who will speak about, the Green Carbon Token. And then at the end of the webinar, as always, we will have a fireside chat where today's presenters will answer some of the questions. So if you have a question you'd like to ask the panel, please simply post it in the Q&A. And please also remember to add panel in the beginning, then simply followed by a question. Okay, so that's today's program, and I would now like to present the first speaker, Claus Skaaning. Claus has a PhD in computer science, specialized in AI, and has taken out over 7 patents. He's a serial entrepreneur, having co-founded more than 5 companies so far. And for the last 5 years, he's been focused on blockchain and has co-founded DigiShares 4 years ago. Claus will now give us a tokenization industry update and shed some light on the current traction of DigiShares. Welcome, Claus.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. My name is Claus. I was one of the co-founders of DigiShares 4 years ago, and of course we are selling a white label platform for real estate tokenization. I think now at this stage we are probably the market leader. We have more than 100 clients globally using our platform, mostly for real estate, but also for other types of assets. Today we are hosting a webinar number 8 or something like that, I think, in our series here, where the purpose is to educate and motivate and to explain about tokenization and the benefits it can give to the real estate industry and also to other industries globally, I would say. For me, it was a personal motivation when we started the company that we were able to achieve also some degree of impact globally, that we could assist people around the world in creating impact-oriented projects, especially with respect to democratization, which I think is a key factor that we can influence. And I'm really pleased today that we can host a webinar focused on this particular topic. So I'm quite excited about that. We have another webinar coming up in October focused on debt, tokenization of debt. Quite a new topic for us, but seems to be becoming more and more popular. We're still looking for speakers, so if anyone here is interested and has something relevant to say, please reach out to us. We're also planning the series of webinars for next year and looking for topics. So if you have a good topic for a webinar, also reach out to us and we'll take it under consideration. We've been extremely active the last few weeks, conducting masterclasses in tokenization in different cities. Last week we were in Las Vegas. 10 days we'll be in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. End of November we'll be in London. So I think I will keep it short today and not say more than that, but give the word back to Jonas. Thanks.
Thank you, Klaus. Okay, so next presenter is Claudia Cordes. And Claudia is currently pursuing a Master of Science in Business Analytics at the University of Southern California. And before joining graduate school, she gained experience in consulting and finalized her bachelor's degree with a thesis on blockchain technology and its use cases for intellectual property. Being equally passionate about sustainability and technology, Claudia is driven to explore opportunities to leverage technology to create sustainable solutions. And on that note, Claudia will now be talking about the ESG of tokenization. And I know it's early where you're calling from, Claudia, in California, but I hope you're ready. So welcome.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here, looking forward to learning a lot from the participants and the questions. Let me share my screen. Please let me know in case you do not see it. 1 second. I hope it's visible now.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you for the kind introduction. As Jonas said, I'm currently at the graduate school at the University of California. And during my last semester, I had the chance to take part in a class which is called Digital Strategies for Sustainability. And the class was very much about thinking about how we can leverage digital solutions to become more sustainable as a whole, but also how to set up companies more sustainable. And we had the wonderful chance to collaborate with DigiShares and Claus. And during this presentation, so our project was very much focused on DigiShares, but I will try to keep it as broad as possible so it has relevance for the whole industry. And I believe Claus will also give you more information then later on DigiShares in specific.
Just quickly, Claudia, we can see your notes and the if you can make the other one full screen, if that's possible.
Yes. Give me 1 second. Obviously, you should not see my notes. Does that work?
Yeah, that works. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so starting off with our research prompt. So our research prompt was, how can real estate tokenization or tokenization in general improve its environmental, social, and governance components? And in order to answer this question, we kind of leveraged several tools, including literature. One of the books that we very much followed and a lot of methodologies that I will refer to are coming from this book, which is called Strategy for Sustainability by Adam Werbach. I can certainly recommend this book to anyone who's interested about ESG and specific going beyond green and kind of translating ESG to hands-on business and how you can implement it for your business. So like I said, a lot of the strategies like Visor, star mapping, and 10 cycle are from this book, and I will refer to those. And then we also leverage domain knowledge, of course, DigiShares team and Claus knowledge, industry reports, and also the USC's department knowledge. We were a team of 5 people with very much different backgrounds, so that was helpful. So we then kind of started with doing our industry analysis, and that was to validate that our research prompt is actually relevant. And we can definitely say that it was. So I will here refer to the real estate market, but obviously this can be different markets depending on the tokenization. However, we found that the real estate market obviously is very unique. It's definitely lagging behind in digitalization. It's also very relevant for personal wealth building, which we found is a big part of our ESG research. It definitely has a high burden of entry. So not everyone is actually able to access this market. However, there's a very high demand. And yeah, digitization, obviously it has changed all of our worlds, but there are a few markets that are definitely lagging behind, and we found it very interesting and promising what tokenization can do in that space. So the first methodology that I will introduce is the star mapping. And the star mapping is very much focused on analyzing changes, especially changes in society, technology, and resources. And when you think about sustainability, it's how can your business or your idea or your product sustain? And sustaining in an ever-changing world has very much a lot to do with thinking about changes. So the first one is society. How do laws and regulations and societal preferences affect your business? So no matter what kind of product or tokenization you're referring to, this is a very valid question. What are the opportunities created by societal change? And is the business a force to make the society stronger? In our research, we have identified those questions and answered them, for example, for DigiShares. But I think whoever is interested in doing the same for their company or their product, I think those are interesting questions. What you would map for society, for example, are regulatory environment, customer preference, and also supplier markets. So how are those changing currently? What might happen in the future? And how is this affecting your business? Then moving on to technology, what are the opportunities provided by the technology? So in order to be sustainable, there needs to be some value that you are bringing. And who might we join to create technological breakthroughs? So collaboration is a very important part of ESG, thinking more about collaborating instead of competing. So here, for example, the information availability, technological innovations, and also customer expectations are a few things that would be mapped. Then resources, obviously very, very important coming to ESG. What processes are resource intensive? So for example, when we think about energy, what are alternatives and how can we use those resources more efficiently? Is the technology maybe even helping to map those resources more efficiently? So then we looked at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and you would see those often in ESG reports. And I think they're very helpful to think about the bigger picture of ESG. So a few that we identified for our project was no poverty, for example, quality education, decent work and economic growth, and all of those obviously can affect or can be true on several layers. So for example, when you take no poverty, obviously you as a company can help to make this goal come true, but also your product might help. So for example, when we talk about real estate, housing obviously is a very important part of giving people shelter, as well as giving people access to actually having housing. So when we talk about tokenization of real estate, for example, to democratize the assets of real estate to avoid poverty. A few more is reduced inequalities. So going back to real estate, this would be that everyone has equal access to it, which is currently not true, but tokenization might change that. Sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and protection, and partnerships for the goals. So also going back to real estate and tokenization, how can you create a community and how can those partnerships help? Continue with the materiality map. So this is a method that is often used in ESG reports as well. So those will depend on your company and your product. So depending on the industry that you're working in, for example, if you're working in fast-moving consumer goods or something else, then this materiality map will depend on your industry. We looked at software and IT services, and obviously this is different than if you're having a tangible product, or your supply chain will very much be different. So what we looked in specific is leadership and governance. So here important are business ethics, competitive behavior, systematic risk management. So as I said, risk management is a big part of ESG. In order to sustain, you have to map your risk. They're ever changing, so keeping a good score of them is very helpful. Then business ethics, especially in a digitalized world and also with tokenization, you probably will work across countries and with different nationalities. So the ethic when it comes to business and thinking about this is very important, as well as competitive behavior. So I alluded to that previously, but preferring collaboration instead of competition is one of them. Then business model and innovation, your product design and life cycle management. So for product design, for example, how is the interface? How is the user experience? How is innovation? Are you having any APIs? Is your system open? All of those are considered to drive ESG. Environment, energy management is a very big one, and we will come to that in a minute. Human capital, so talent obviously is one of the most important factors to have a sustainable business, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then social capital, customer privacy, data security, selling practices, and product labeling. We will also comment to that in more detail in a second. So starting off with our recommendations, and like I said, those are kind of specific to real estate in some sense, but I would challenge everyone to, in your head, think about those more broader for tokenization. So the first one would be environment. And when we think about tokenization, then for example, how can you highlight which of the assets are actually using sustainable materials? So for example, we thought about real estate and how, for example, you can actually highlight developers who are using sustainable resources. A second one is the transition to energy-intensive blockchain intensive blockchain consensus mechanisms. So obviously the blockchain environment has developed and people are driven to find consensus mechanisms that do require less energy. And I think this will also be a part later on. Someone will probably talk more about this in detail. So I would leave it up to them, but obviously this is a very important part. We all know that this might be a point of criticism, but we also think there is a lot of opportunities to highlight and educate about people about consensus mechanisms that might require a lot less energy and are more environmentally friendly. Social, we found this in our project to be a very important part. Obviously, no matter which company you're working at or in whatever field, talent is crucial. So to think about HR in a sustainable way is to plan ahead to make sure your employees know where they're going, their opportunities, and to overall create a sustainable experience for them. That is not only dealing with current challenges or opportunities, but also looking ahead and making sure that your HR functions are sustainable. So here are a few items that we looked at in more detail. For example, compliance, payroll, recruiting, onboarding, and performance. And then another factor that we found very, very interesting in the social space is education and policy. To provide access to education and materials and to democratize assets that might be impactful for groups that have not easy access to education. So I highlighted that before, but we found that tokenization democratizes assets, and this might be very, very useful for especially people who might not have access to education. So doing your share or your part of educating people who might not have access through the traditional system, we believe is very crucial, as well as forming policy. I also mentioned that previously, for example, in the real estate space, we found that policy, or I mean, we could even take this broader to tokenization or blockchain policy is always lagging behind. This is definitely a threat because obviously it can change your business, but on the flip side, this could also be turned into an opportunity. So this might be an opportunity to shape policies and to become a market leader and advise regulations or regulators. And then the last part of ESG, governance. We very much focused on that. A lot of things that we found were very specific to DigiShares, so I will try to make this a little more broader, but obviously data privacy, data security, and intellectual property are crucial. So target environmentally friendly and sustainable data storages. Thinking about what data is sustainable to actually save. Do I really need to track all of the data of my customers? What is sustainable there? What do I actually really, what does provide value? What is useful? Then also communicate the need for privacy as a social value. So communicating also with your stakeholders and your customers, the data you are saving, the data you are providing, and that you do see privacy as a social value. Risk management, as I said before, this is one of the biggest in order to sustain and be sustainable. So mapping risk, communicate the benefits of tokenization for times of crisis. We found this a very big one. Klaus might allude to this later, but obviously our world is in times of crisis all the time, and how can tokenization help to manage risk in those times? And then also the creation of risk register. So keeping track, kind of mapping your risk. What's the current state? What do you think might happen in the future? And just keeping a map of those we found to be essential, especially working in a field that develops as fast as tokenization. Yeah, I think those are my slides. I hope I didn't go over time. I believe questions will be asked and answered later. I very much look forward. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Claudia. And also thank you so much for the big work you and your group did for DigiShares. We very much appreciate that. Okay, so yeah, next speaker up is Peter Gaffney. And Peter is the head of research at Security Token Advisors, an advisory group that facilitates the tokenization of assets for clients ranging from real estate managers to private equity and venture capital firms to pre-IPO shares. He leverages traditional Wall Street experience with former roles at Global X ETFs and boutique private equity firms to bring the public and private sectors under one roof via security tokens. He published the State of Security Tokens 2022 as a baseline of knowledge for the industry and works to create a more fluid ecosystem among industry participants, platforms, and services, including an institutional education partnership with investment manager Arca. And Peter will now be talking about tokenization in 2022. We'll be covering the first half of the year in review. So Peter, the scene is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the intro. I assume my screen is up. Does that look good?
Looks good, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, everybody, I hope everyone's doing well. Real quick, so this is basically a report the Security Token Advisors team put out. I think it was in July or August, right after kind of a little bit beyond the first half of the year, but so much was happening in the industry. We wanted to cover that nice and complexly. So STA, as a quick overview, we're a full suite consulting firm. So we'll work with the tech partners, the transfer agents, legal groups, broker dealers, and banks, and any kind of third parties that may be involved in the tokenization process on behalf of our clients, as kind of covered before. Right now, this is pretty much just a big collage of headlines and developments that have happened from January through September, with a little outlook of Q4 going forward at the end. I think this is the best way to really show what's happening in the overarching tokenization industry on both a retail level, a product level, and like an institutional operational level. So a couple of big things we've seen, we know so far INX raised 85 million with basically a security token. Exodus raised 75 million with the security token. Hamilton Lane tokenized an actually a $2.2 billion global private assets fund. We know the NYSE's parent company ICE is stepping in. We know Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan have been doing stuff together on kind of the operational level. So we know the existing secondary market is around $20 billion. Really estimate the primary market to be more like 70 to 80 billion. And let's take a look at some of the headlines that kind of got us there, got us that estimate into the points that we are at right now. So right off the bat, January was a pretty fire month, kicking off 2022. We had new approvals on a lot of different angles. We had Fusang, Prometheum, Gemini, the Boston Security Token Exchange, and Simbridge all getting unique approvals, some on the national exchange level like BSTX, others on the ATS or the securities exchange level. We had a couple new listings and offerings go live. We had T27 in San Jose, basically a $100 million commercial real estate property. We had Dignity Gold go live. We had Blockstream mining node going live on Bitfinex. So that's all positive momentum on the product level. And we've had a couple investments happen. Tokeny was working with Invenium and Apex Group. And perhaps most importantly, we had JP Morgan announce that this could be the year of asset tokenization of the blockchain bridge. And as we'll see soon, they certainly made true on that prediction. So looking into February, this was also a pretty solid month. We had Curzio Research, a previous client of STA, actually list on T0, which was awesome to see. They used to just be on Merge over in Seychelles, the national exchange. So it's nice to see them coming over into the States and getting some access there. We had Securitize buying up another transfer agent for new accounts. We had my company, STA, it launched the first edition of their newsletter. So a monthly newsletter called The Recap, basically highlighting all the month headlines, breakdowns on the institutional side, on the real estate side, highlighting vendors and our clients and everything in between. And then perhaps most importantly this month, we have David Goon of ICE, who owns the NYSE, who we know invested in T0, now taken role as T0's new CEO. And so now we could expect basically the full firepower of ICE to be behind T0, but more importantly, to be behind the general tokenization industry, which is really the takeaway from this piece. March was also an incredible month on the product side, a nod to DigiShares' own market space capital client, issuing the spot at Myra Park token with T0 now for full listing. That was super exciting to see come along. Shout out to the whole DigiShares team for running that in the back end and getting that to that process. We had Securitize listing the Exodus token that was previously only listed on T0. We had IX Swap, a very cool kind of DeFi security token enabled DEX, listing the Millennium Sapphire token. We had Hamilton Lane, like I mentioned earlier in the slideshow, officially announcing their GPA fund tokenized with ADDX. Invenium hosted an awesome conference right down here in Miami that brought kind of a bunch of the industry together, kind of looking at these ideas. Coinbase finally, kind of came under SEC pressure, allegedly selling 79 unregistered crypto securities. And as we'll see, that kind of divulged throughout the rest of the year. Lastly, the STM team, our sister company, our data and media side, launched a kind of full industry-wide real estate tokenization intel report that actually is for sale either with us or with Cointelegraph on their terminal. So for anyone interested in just seeing a nice overview of the industry, of what's happening in real estate tokenization, kind of secondary performance and primary market state, that's a great resource right there. Looking into April, this was also a pretty cool month. So personally, this is when Jonah Schulman, my colleague, and myself started the Tokenization for Institutions video series with Arca. So that was very exciting, kind of talking about Arca's Artcoin as collateral management from a product level for treasury management and kind of internal liquidity. Very cool use cases. Great episode, obviously, toot my own horn. But that was the start of the series. Very exciting stuff coming out. Alongside that, we had INX and Stalker partner up to kind of further their cross-border issuances. We had Securitize list a music NFT, an MFT, that's structured as a security. Opulus was the company, which was awesome. I saw in the chat box before someone mentioned Realty, and Realty, the real estate issuer, actually partnered with Aave to create a white labeled real estate tokenization collateralization service. So if you had tokenized real estate shares or tokens, you could post that in Aave liquidity pools, much like you would any other crypto asset, and kind of generate yield on that, or stake and generate yield from that. So pretty cool stuff. And lastly, we had the very first tokenized VC fund, Spice VC, making its first ever investment payout after, I think it was 4 years of inception. And that's great to see, right? Because we could always talk about tokenizing PE funds, tokenizing VC funds, but until we see it go full life cycle to that investor payout, we don't know if it's truly feasible. And now we do. So shout out to Spice VC for that, really solidifying the model there. Moving into May, I would say this was a conference heavy and a funding heavy month. So DigiShares and STA, we had an awesome event at Red Rooster right here in Miami, just talking about the tokenization of real estate assets. That was a really great turnout. I met a lot of people from the local area and people that flew in, even from, I know, Utah, from Washington State, pretty far flight to get to Miami. So awesome to see that turnout. Simultaneously, we actually had the STM CEO, Kyle Sonlin, hosting the ATS panel up in New York City for a Security Token Summit. So that was also great momentum. Our parent company, Security Token Group, closed our Series A, which is fantastic. Oasis Pro Markets had one of the more marquee Series A's in the game so far. And at the same time, ADDX solidified another investment from Hamilton Lane, one of their clients, as we know, and a couple other pretty big names. Rialto got funding from Invenium, and they had a nice partnership, and BNP Paribas joined JPM's blockchain-based repo network, which I love talking about. I probably over talk about it, but it's great. It's already surpassed $350 billion in transaction volume in just 18 months. which is a pretty nice signal that, tokenized assets and blockchain-based securities are pretty feasible from an operational level and likely from a product level too going forward. Moving into June, I said they'd be a recurring name, and yet again, JP Morgan, they announced actually their TCN, Tokenized Collateral Network, and essentially they were just tokenizing money market funds that are offered through BlackRock, tokenize them internally, work with them in kind of their own Onyx system and Onyx platform to figure out how to really use these as collateral with other banks, with other institutions, other parties, perhaps with their own clients. And they announced that they're kind of doing a joint venture with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, who's also been quite active in the space, which was great to see. So now we have the banking level, we have the government level. All we need to do is get all that to the retail investor level, and we've come full circle. But simultaneously, we also had the SEC cracking down on Binance, saying the BNB token is a security due to its kind of profit sharing and utility properties. So that'll be interesting to see how that kind of unfolds going forward more. Fireblocks announced a new integration. Australia's main bank actually bought tokenized carbon credits, which is very cool to see them holding a tokenized asset. Not real estate, not a venture product, but a tokenized carbon credit, still pretty cool. We had Relio listing on T0, and we actually had one of our more marquee episodes with Jeff Dorman, CIO of Arca. That was a whole masterclass. He has some fantastic ideas surrounding company tokens and how we can move from just stocks and rewards points to kind of blending them together under a security token aspect. July, this was our favorite month because we actually launched our security token market crowdfund on Avalanche with Securitize. That's currently open for anyone that's interested. Simultaneously, we had a few companies join our data partnership network, including Stobox, CryptoSX, and Realty. So we love seeing that momentum. Also on the right, we have Yuga Labs getting threatened with a possible class action lawsuit. I think this graphic, it was pretty hilarious seeing the ape kind of in front of the mugshot area. So that's also interesting to see, the blurring of the lines between NFTs, utility token type projects, but also if you have some sort of profit sharing or other promise of delivery of some product, that's going to step over into the SEC's eyes. And now, we have to follow that story to see what's going on. Lastly, BNY Mellon and Goldman, another institutional headline here, did the first ever blockchain-based agency security transaction through HQLAX, which is pretty much an enterprise blockchain solution, really geared towards institutions like the two we see here. I love seeing that institutional progress. I think that's really where a lot of firepower comes from. And once that enters the space enough, they'll bring necessary liquidity to benefit retail, is my personal thoughts on that. And I think it's just a necessary key to the puzzle right now. Moving into August, this is another, apologies for the colorful slide here, but there was a lot happening. This was another, Aberdeen, one of the largest asset managers in the UK, invested in Archax, one of the UK-based security token marketplaces and exchanges. Coinbase, yet again, getting hit with another class action lawsuit surrounding illegal securities that they've listed, aka cryptocurrencies that have securities properties that we've been talking about so much. STM actually announced Spice VC as its lead investor in the crowdfund, so that was great to see. Simultaneously, we had Actionariat and Archax yet again join the data partnership network. I was pretty happy. I got to unveil one of our STA clients, Ovenu, basically a Web3 valuation and monetization software, if you will, or a platform. Pretty cool. If you have something you're looking to tokenize, maybe you don't need to fractionalize it yet. Maybe you just want short-term financing. Maybe you want to lease something out. They have a solution for that. So Ovenu, feel free to get in touch with me or with them directly if interested. Very cool angle to complement, full asset tokenization. And lastly, Binance actually removed its own BNB, or actually removed the AMP token, one of the tokens that came up, that was named in the SEC allegations regarding securities components. So Binance is getting ahead of the game by just delisting that all in all. And lastly, coming into September, where we are right now, today, actually, the STA team is launching its real estate tokenization education class. So this is a multi-step class, can do it on your own at your own pace, but the STA team put a lot of work into it to basically cover the basics from what is tokenization, what are the benefits, what are the differences between traditional assets and tokenized or digital assets here, all with the real estate focus. Great for managers, great for any developers, great for real estate private equity analysts, anyone getting educated on the space. I think it's a necessity. I think it's a bargain as well. Feel free to check that out on the STA site or any platform we have. Additionally, I love just seeing the KKR headline come through. I'm sure many of us saw that. Basically, they tokenized a portion of their $4 billion healthcare fund on Securitize with Avalanche, similar play actually to the STM crowdfund. I think it's a great vote of confidence for the industry. And we've seen stuff happen already with State Street announcing that they intend to tokenize in 2023. Hamilton Lane, like we mentioned, Aberdeen and Schroeder's kind of getting involved now. I mean, the writing's on the wall. A lot of these VC funds, PE funds of size, general asset managers will have to get some exposure. And I think getting educated is the best piece right there. So seminars like this with DigiShares, programs that we're offering with STA, all great options, all highly recommended to anyone in or out of the space. And lastly, if you need to contact me, it's just peter@securitytokenadvisors.com or LinkedIn, which I'm very active on. And that's all I have. If there are any questions, I'm happy to rip through them now or wait till the end.
Thank you, Peter. I think we're out of time now. So I see there's one question for you. Feel free to go into the chat and answer that. Otherwise, we can take it at the panel discussion at the end. But yeah, thank you so much. It was a really good way to catch up with all the exciting things going on in the industry. So thank you. Okay, next up is Noah Baalessanvu, who is the head of technology at Savannah. And Noah has extensive experience in the technology space in the region and has trained as an electrical engineer and has over 7 years experience in the telecommunications sector and over 12 years experience in the cybersecurity space and over 3 years experience in the civic technology. He currently serves on the National Information Security Advisory Group as the chairman. And in addition to this, he's also to his cybersecurity portfolio. Noah is also the founder and head of technology at Savannah, a digital transformation company. And now Noah will be talking about unlocking blockchain and crypto for emerging markets. So Noah, yeah, welcome.
Okay, hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah,
Jonas?
Yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you very much to the team at DigiShares for setting this up. And it's a pleasure and honor to be speaking to us about an area we're very passionate about here at Savannah. And I'm going to quickly speak about our experience in unlocking blockchain and crypto in emerging markets such as Africa and the likes. Yeah, I'll just share a few slides that I came up with, and hopefully this will help tell the story. So it's a very deep story. It's a very big story. I can't summarize it in the few minutes that I have, but hopefully I can touch on a few items that are of interest and of keen focus in the space. Just a quick introduction to who we are as Savannah. Savannah is an ecosystem. It's a group of companies that are leveraging blockchain and crypto to bring solutions to businesses, to organizations, and to development organizations and to governments. And we have found that there are unique ways in which these technologies can solve problems on continent, and we're leveraging that as a business. And so our purpose is to catalyze digital transformation in businesses, governments, and all other organizations by leveraging innovation and advisory services to help them be more impactful, more efficient, and more sustainable. We do that through two main ways. Number one is that we offer advisory services. And through our advisory services, we help organizations understand what emerging technologies are and how to leverage them. So we look at it from strategy through innovation and management as well. We also offer technology solutions. So here we build products and solutions, either custom, bespoke for the particular client, and I'll give some examples as I go on, or we build direct to customer products that are directly affected, that directly go to the customer in the marketplace. So just when we're talking about blockchain, so blockchain is a very broad subject, and our experience in the market has been, to put it lightly, has been colorful, if I'm to look at history. So largely, it's largely, it's similar story as in many other continents, but specifically towards, the lack of knowledge and the confusion between, the classic confusion between Bitcoin and blockchain. So part of our journey, a huge part of our journey has been in just raising the awareness of what blockchain is and what advantages it brings, what it is as a technological innovation that is so different from a typical database, which is the infrastructure that much of our technology is built on today. And so just being able to understand that fundamental difference has been largely our work in educating our potential clients and educating regulators, educating different stakeholders in understanding the technology. But from an IFC report, which puts it really well, one of the key observations is that, and we are seeing this on the continent, is that blockchain, being a new mechanism of trust, is able to deliver significant productivity gains and in multiple industries, chief of which is financial. But then we are starting to see applications in different areas, like in energy, in intellectual property, and in public sector service delivery. And so these are areas that are now leveraging the trust network, which powered by blockchain. Specifically, emerging markets are poised to be adopting this rapidly because many, we have either have no infrastructure at all, by legacy infrastructure, speaking from a financial perspective where, majority of the population is unbanked. And so we have little incumbent investment in the status quo. And so we have seen indicators that are going to drive very high adoption of blockchain-based technologies. And we are seeing this in different spaces, whether it is crypto, and I'll talk about that later, but just being able to deliver services efficiently to the populace, as blockchain is really proving itself strong. Another thing that is a trend that blockchain is going to ride on the continent or in many other emerging markets is the digital finance trend. Anyone who studied Africa, you'll see that there is a massive growth of mobile technology on the continent, far surpassing even traditional telecommunication infrastructure. So basically, there was a massive leapfrog that began in the early 2000s and has reached its pinnacle, seeing massive adoption of mobile devices, and as a result, solutions built on these mobile technologies. So we're seeing a growth of mobile networks, a growth of cloud-based solutions, big data is becoming a huge thing, all of which blockchain is going to play a key role in connecting and bringing online the next billion people. Of course, blockchain technology spans way beyond the use cases in the financial sector, even though that's the first area that it has taken a foray. There are many other areas like in supply chains and global value chains, because of blockchain's technology's unique ability to bring information from diverse, lengthy, deep value chains, to bring that critical data to the surface for consumption by particular stakeholders, while maintaining integrity and privacy of the transacting parties. So that unique proposition of blockchain has allowed it to become very good in traceability-based solutions, whether it's traceability of drugs from the factory to the pharmacy, or whether it is traceability of agricultural produce, tracing coffee from the mountains where it is grown in Uganda to the coffee cup in Starbucks in New York. So being able to bring this traceability and this journey of produce from source to consumption, blockchain lends itself very strongly as a technology of choice. Then also looking at governance, and here specifically, blockchain brings the much needed and coveted transparency when governments are dealing with their populace. And so looking at regulatory frameworks that are being discussed, and the whole emergence of RegTech, where we're seeing blockchain-based applications lending themselves very strong as a medium for public citizen interaction and engagement. And then of course, looking at the adoption of clean, affordable, and resilient energy sources in emerging markets, the blockchain being a catalyst for that. And then also looking at the use of blockchain presents unique legal challenges, because when you think about things like smart contracts and the disruption they are causing both in the legal and in the financial areas, it's important to understand that blockchain as a technology has far-reaching implications. And this is not, it's not the continent like Africa and other emerging markets are not immune to this reality. And of course, this is one of the characteristics of heated debate in different spaces. But as we go ahead, we are going to see more forming of ideas and forming of applications that meet specific use cases. And we are starting to see that trend right now. So narrowing it down to some of the use cases in Africa, I'm going to share some of the work we are doing in Savannah. And this is definitely by no means exhaustive, but these are the areas in which I can speak authoritatively. And these are looking at blockchain deployments in both government and in private sector. Looking also at the financial sector, of course, there are many, anyone is a Google search away from finding out the number of exchanges that exist on the continent, but I'll talk about that later. But looking at blockchain specific use cases, apart from crypto, we are seeing the growth of the use of blockchain in specific areas. Now, particularly, we have deployed commercial blockchains in the telecom sector, tax and financial services sector for the KYC properties of blockchain. So basically, entities that need to transact or synchronize KYC information are finding blockchain a very useful technology. Case in point, right now in Uganda, we recently commissioned a portal which is now responsible for matching the SIM cards to national identities. So by law in Uganda, every SIM card issued must be attached to a form of identity as part of KYC. Now that attestation for over 35 million SIM cards in Uganda is now captured on a blockchain. And to the best of my knowledge, that's one of the first applications, commercial applications in a government entity of blockchain. Another area that we have deployed blockchain, like I mentioned earlier, is in traceability of agriculture, of the agricultural value chain. Here we have a direct-to-market product called Walimi. You can find that at walimi.com, which is both a B2B and a B2C portal, which allows for people on the commercial side. People can go online and be able to order their produce and have it shipped to them depending on where they are. But on the tail end, what we have also powered is traceability. So the people that are the customers that are on Walimi are able to trace the produce right to the farm in which it was produced. Now we have various value chains, the dairy value chain, we have and a grain value chain, and all these are able to trace back to the source. Another interesting thing that we are doing with Walimi is that we are also incorporating blockchain technology in our vehicles and machinery that are used for agriculture. So currently we are piloting electric-powered tractors, electric-powered grain millers, and other on-farm technologies are being powered by electricity and solar. Now, these are run on proprietary smart batteries of one of our partners, that are able to track the mileage of, for example, a tractor, or the usage of various farm machinery that are electrically powered. This information is then going to be captured on a blockchain, and this information can be used as the source of trust when dealing with sort of like ESG incentives, like carbon credits, etc. You're able to determine right down to a machine level that, you know, this whole process was used, you know, in a carbon negative way. So basically removing all the, you know, one of the things we're concerned and we are passionate about over the next few years will be to decarbonize the agricultural value chain. And we're able to confidently do this because we have the technology in place that can track not only the produce, but even the machinery that moves the produce from point A to point B, even in terms of processing. So that's something we're excited about as regards Walimi. And then also another area that we're working on right now is in the real estate tokenization. And here we want to give a shout out to our partner, DigiShares, that has helped us power up our product, and we're about to launch. And this product is, of course, dealing with real estate tokenization in Uganda. And so we already have a couple of projects in the pipeline. And now soon it will be anyone across the world is going to be able to buy a portion of real estate in Uganda, especially now that the real estate industry is heating up. You know, we have vibrant growth in the economy here, and this vibrant growth can be tapped into through products like Redex that are digitizing the whole, for example, real estate process. When speaking about crypto, quickly, again, this is a topic that can take hours, but I'm just going to start off by highlighting.
Just quickly, Noah,
yeah.
We are almost out of time, so if you can quickly wrap it up.
Okay, I just have one more slide actually. And so I think many of us on the call are familiar with the Chainalysis report on crypto adoption. And if you look at the top 20, in the top 10, you'll find largely emerging markets. This shows you the trend of crypto adoption is highest in emerging markets. And this is the story that even Africa is not missing out on. Just from recent sources, you'll find that capital raised by African countries is already in the billions, even in a bear market. That shows you the confidence that investors have with the growth of the industry. And then finally, just to highlight recent, just in this quarter alone, there's been, you know, investments of over $91 billion just in the first quarter of 2022, with Web3 Web3 companies like Mara, Nestcoin, and Jumbo having raised, and most recently Yellow Card that has raised a series, I think it's a series B of about $40 million, and all these are African-based exchanges, and more are coming. And this just highlights the trend that crypto is in Africa. It is growing and booming, and the sky's the limit. I will take questions at the Q&A time, but otherwise, thank you so much for the opportunity, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Nora. It was really good to see some real live examples of how blockchain technology can impact the world. So that was really good. Thank you so much for that. And I guess we'll see each other at the Fireside Chat at the end. Okay, so next presenter is Derek from Construo, and she's here to introduce us to the collaborative platform and marketplace for the construction industry. So Derek, welcome. I don't know if you're unmuted. I cannot hear you.
Yeah, sorry. So this is a quick introduction to Construo, and we're a collaborative platform and marketplace for the construction industry. So we were formed about 3 years ago now, and the real goal behind Construo is kind of a similar theme, which has been running so far in this presentation, is about making knowledge accessible to all. So in the sense of kind of tying into the presentation, we offer a vast resource library, which includes specific resources on blockchain, on tokenization, on crypto, but this is all resources which tie into the construction industry. So by making this knowledge accessible for all, it enables a lot of businesses to progress and to access the digitization which they're not currently accessing. The construction industry as a whole, it's typically very backwards and it's very stuck in keeping things pen to paper. But by creating Construo, we sort of enabled a place where it brings everything forward and it kind of enables a community that can progress the industry as a whole. So I'm just going to bring up, I think, a short video just as a brief introduction. If I just show my screen here. So in conclusion, I'd say that is just a brief look into Construo, and it may be worth looking if you're looking for resources to do with the industry, if you're looking to find any specific people or businesses to collaborate with within the industry. It's quite a nice all-encompassing platform that's free to use for businesses and individuals alike. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Derek, and telling us about Construo. Thanks. Okay, so next presenter is Conor Platt, who's the founder and CIO of Confluence Analytics. And Conor is the founder of Confluence Analytics, which is a firm focused on tools, signals, and solutions to sustainably beat both traditional and digital markets. And previously, Conor was the co-founding CEO and CIO of Ether Capital, an investment management company which launched the best performance ESG ETF, Ether Climate Leadership Index. Conor worked at Brown Brothers Harriman on the portfolio strategy team upon completing his MBA at the Tabor School of Business at Carnegie Mellon University. And he was also an analyst at Morgan Stanley in New York after receiving his master's in finance with honors at Carnegie Mellon University. And Conor will be sharing the stage with Andrew. And Andrew leads KlimaDAO's partnerships team and works with stakeholders across the digital carbon ecosystem to accelerate the delivery of finance to high-impact sustainability projects globally. And the two presenters will now be talking about the state of digital carbon. So Conor and Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I guess
I will get stuff started here with this presentation. Hopefully this works here. Let's see. Okay, can you see the presentation well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Yes, I'll get things kicked off here. So I'm with KlimaDAO. KlimaDAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. We have about 60,000 members of the DAO and hundreds of contributors from around the world. And the problem that we're really going after is the delivery of climate finance to sustainability projects, which help reduce emissions, through mitigation and also remove existing emissions from the atmosphere. And as you can see from this graph here, there's a lot of work that we have to do if we actually have a chance of reaching net zero emissions by mid-century. And the mechanism by which KlimaDAO is active in this space is through something called the voluntary carbon market. So what are carbon markets exactly? Well, the carbon market is essentially a tool for directing finance at projects that remove or mitigate carbon. They can come from a variety of different technology types. So here you have a few examples. On the carbon removal side, you may have nature-based solutions. These are things like simply planting new trees or mangroves, or perhaps using biochar as a soil enhancement. And you also have more, let's say, technical solutions where you're actually pumping CO2 down beneath bedrock. You also have the reduction side of things. So those are like renewable energy that's replacing fossil fuels or conserving existing forests and making sure that there's no deforestation that's happening. And that's a particularly important area because that's actually responsible for about 12% of global emissions, just deforestation alone. So in order to really avoid the worst of climate change, though, to scale up these technologies, the carbon market needs to grow tremendously. And most estimates at least 15x by 2030 or even 100x by mid-century. And the issue here is that the market right now is very opaque, it's quite fragmented, and there's not clear price transparency for the different participants. And this is really where KlimaDAO is coming in. And to understand that, let's take a look at the market today. And there's a lot up here, but there's just a few key components. One is the carbon registries themselves. So these are the standards bodies that actually ensure that the carbon project is really having an impact, and they develop methodologies to compute the carbon savings. And then you have project developers who are pulling capital together to develop these projects. And then you have various traders and end users. Where KlimaDAO is primarily active currently is on the trading side. We're helping disintermediate the market. We're working with project developers to basically have a clear pipeline to bring their inventory of carbon offsets and different projects directly to the end users themselves. And we have a number of different tools to really provide very clear market analysis for demand side participants. So you may have heard, though, that blockchain is bad for the environment. I think most people on this call know that's not necessarily true. You need to take a nuanced take. For example, proof of work, in the case of Bitcoin, it's a huge amount of energy, but it's still less than tumble dryers in the United States. And then when it comes to KlimaDAO, we're operating on the Polygon blockchain, which is a proof of stake network and has very, very low emissions equal to a couple hundred laptops every year. And so how does the on-chain carbon market work? Well, there's a few different steps here. The key piece is that carbon is brought from the registries themselves and bridged onto the blockchain. And this is done through NFTs. I know there's a number of other speakers that have talked about NFTs on this in these presentations. They're really great instruments for storing data. And so each NFT essentially stores the data on the carbon project, things like the year that the offset was issued, the geography of the project, and the technology type, and so on. And on the right-hand side, you can just see a few examples of the tokenized carbon credits that have already been bridged onto the blockchain here. And these are all offsets that then, through KlimaDAO's interfaces, you can actually offset and claim the environmental benefit from. So one of the key pieces that KlimaDAO is really bringing to the table is the data analytics portion. So right now, the market is really typified by a lot of very opaque OTC deals. You don't necessarily know the price that offsets are being sold for, the volumes that are being traded, and so on. But when you move all of these projects onto the blockchain, you basically have real-time insights then into the state of the market. So if you go to carbon.klimadao.finance, you can view our carbon dashboard. And on this dashboard, you can view things like how many credits have been tokenized, in which countries the projects comes from, and so on. And just to drill down even deeper there, so there's a data table that shows you the project ID. So this is a VCS project, it means it's from the Vera standard. It shows you the token address, so that NFT that represents a specific batch from a project, the quantity that's available on chain, the vintage, the country it's from, methodology, etc. It's all clearly available in real time. And then when you offset that, you can select specific projects, and you can trace this all the way back to the carbon registry itself. So this is really a new paradigm in how people can transact in the carbon market. Let me go back real quick. Whoop, I think I lost the slide there. Essentially, one of the things that this allows you to do is to actually have integrations because the carbon is on chain and you have this data, and that's actually where Conor is going to come in now, because he's developed something called the Climate Optimized Direct Index. And this is able to pull different types of carbon projects directly from the blockchain for use by corporates. And again, because everything is transparently available there, people can then say, well, I want to support projects that may be nature-based from, let's say, the Amazon region, and you can do that. Or your criteria may be that I want to support, let's say, wind turbine installations in developing regions. And you can do that as well. And because it's all on the blockchain, you're able to have that type of programmatic offsetting capability. And with that, I'll hand it over to Conor.
Thank you, Drew. Excellent. And I will just quickly. So as Drew mentioned, and as many of the folks on the call may be aware, in March of this year, the SEC here in the US voted on a rule that all companies need to disclose their carbon footprints, scopes 1 and 2. There's some debates about scope 3. This is behavior that many of the companies are already engaging in. And as was mentioned in the beginning of the call, I built an investment product, an ETF, if people are aware, which is an exchange traded fund that was built primarily on using these admissions as a way of ferreting out efficient supply chains. So with that in mind, the big thing that Drew really touched upon that really unlocks a major sea change from our point of view is the ability to systematically and efficiently offset carbon. And we'll go through some of the main highlights that Drew touched upon earlier, but lower fees, the ability to break up your carbon footprint over quarters rather than all at once, and the ability to do this in a way that is much cheaper and more transparent is going to really create a big sea change in financial products, first with sustainable products, but then I think with all products going forward. Sorry, I don't know why this isn't moving. All right, so as we talked about, KlimaDAO and Confluence have been creating a solution that allows folks to customize their portfolios and then calculate the cost of those emissions, and then finally to offset those emissions efficiently. So let's talk a little bit about the cost of emissions first, because the good news is that the actual cost of action is really not that much. In fact, it's surprisingly low with this innovation unlocked. So two very large financial products here in the States, the S&P 500 ETF. This is the investment benchmark that 90% of investment portfolios are benchmarked against. And the good news is from a scope 1 and 2 perspective, it is producing about 2 basis points of total cost as it relates to admissions. We go into some of the reporting of this. So that is the 48 metric tons annually that the S&P is producing. And the way we get to that is we look at admissions over market cap and then back into what your investment dollar per $1 million, what the amount of emissions you'd be responsible for. And it's really no surprise, there's really about 80% of the emissions come from 2 sectors. The S&P is a well-balanced portfolio, so you'll see every sector represented. You can see though that there's ways, and we have developed ways to, and we'll go to this, we have developed ways on the portfolio side to look at signals to overcome the performance overhang of most sustainable products that most investors fear, and then combine that with the systematic offsets to create something that truly delights the sustainable investor, and then over time will just allow a normal investor 5 to 10 years from now to just be part of the process. We go into a deeper profile of all these emissions. And as Drew touched on, and I'll stop moving around here, as Drew touched on, the portfolio of those admissions will have been expanding and will continue to expand over time, allowing investors to have a portfolio customized to their values and generating capital while constantly looking for changes in that behavior, and then systematically on a quarterly basis, offsetting those emissions to the extent that the user would like. And this really moves investing from being a cause of emissions or a byproduct of investing is emissions to being an agent of change. I think that's kind of the extent of it. We look forward to taking questions at the end. And Drew, I don't know if you'd like to add anything additional.
No, just that, this is a really clear example of the integration opportunity when you take offsets and what was, not a digital empowered market in any sense, and then bring them onto the blockchain. These types of integration opportunities, are very clear now. They're available. And so if you're in the audience or, another panelist here and you want to discuss integration potentials, either leveraging the Cody tool or just leveraging on-chain carbon, I'd be happy to chat. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andrew and Conor. Sounds really, really interesting. Okay, so next speaker up is Callum, who's the founder and CEO of Renewablox. And Callum has 5 years experience in Bitcoin and crypto mining. And besides that, he's a serial entrepreneur and innovator. Callum has a passion for Bitcoin mining, renewable energy projects, and ESG. And related to that, he'll now be speaking about the ESG of Bitcoin mining. So Callum, welcome.
Great, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin mining's relationship with ESG and how that relationship is changing quite rapidly. So how is Bitcoin mining perceived in the media? I'm sure you all know it uses a lot of energy, 127 billion kilowatt hours to be precise. And at its peak, that represented 0.65% of global energy use, which is more than some countries, as outlined here. Bitcoin mining currently emits 96.6 million tons of CO2 per year. And at the current fossil fuel to renewables ratio, this has the potential to rise to greater than 350 million tons by 2030. However, the reality is that Bitcoin mining has the fastest rate of adoption of renewables than any industry or country in the world. And the Bitcoin Mining Council now estimates that roughly 58% of Bitcoin is mined from a renewable source. So if Bitcoin miners continue this transition to renewables, which Renewablox is aiming to be a big part of, then the CO2 projections on the previous slide will be significantly lower. So we've spoken about how Bitcoin mining is moving towards carbon neutrality. However, can mining become carbon negative? So the answer is yes. And what we're going to see is a dramatic shift in the narrative of Bitcoin mining. This is going to come in 3 ways: through methane mitigation, grid stabilization, and adding renewables to the grid. And we're going to do a brief dive into all 3. So a little on methane and climate change. Of the 1.1 degree global temperature rise since pre-industrial times, methane is responsible for about 1/3 of that. Methane is 80 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas, and thus burning methane is in effect 98.75% better for the environment than if it would have been allowed to emit. Agriculture, landfills, and oil and gas are all significant contributors of methane emissions globally and represent 76% in the US in 2020. So there's 2 options for mitigating methane. The first is to burn it in complete combustion and generate electricity. And the second is to flare it. And for those that don't know what flaring is, this is an example here. One of those options offers monetization and the other one doesn't. So it seems a fairly obvious choice. However, what do agric, landfill, oil and gas all have in common is that individually they produce quite small quantities of methane, and they are typically sourced quite far from civilization. So for the vast majority, they are not economically viable to grid tie, generate power, and send that to power a small town, for example. It just doesn't make economic sense. Thus, methane emitting sites are currently being pushed by regulators, which is the stick, to capture and flare their methane. This is an expensive process for site owners, offers no monetization, and so there's very little incentive for them to do it, especially when there are so many sites for the regulators to tap into. So this here is a map of 1,404 of such sites, landfills specifically, that currently have no methane capture or flaring. And across all these sites, there is about 1.4 billion tons of waste. So Bitcoin miners can partner with these methane emitting sites, which is the carrot, to monetize their power by mining Bitcoin. And there are companies doing this now. An example is Vespine Energy. They're about to launch their pilot site in Central California, and that is to be one of many sites across the US. So this brings us to our first key takeaway, that Bitcoin mining is location agnostic. Grid stabilization. So grid demand fluctuates between base and peak loads, of which there's typically a morning and an evening peak, as you can see on this chart. Modern smart grids are very well designed to withstand peak loads, creating the reliable systems that we all take for granted. Occasionally, these peak loads can spike above typical levels, and so the grid needs to react quickly to ensure reliability. Unfortunately, efficiency, cost effectiveness, and pollution levels are often sacrificed when ensuring this reliability. And what do I mean by that? It's peaker power plants. So peaker plants provide occasional power during times of exceptionally high demand. So they kick in when that peak spikes above those normal levels. The Peak Coalition have done a lot of research into this area, specifically into New York City. So there are 18 of those 1,000 in NYC, and between 2010 and 2019, New York paid $4.5 billion to these peaker plants simply to remain idling. So that was to produce no power at all. It was just to wait for a peak demand event to occur. Peakers are the single most expensive source of electricity, 1,300% higher than the average cost in New York State. So how can Bitcoin miners help? Bitcoin miners increase the base load without increasing the peak load, and this is a mechanism called valley filling. Increasing the base load incentivizes the build out of additional capacity, particularly via renewables. Peak loads are unaffected, as during periods of exceptionally high demand, miners can power down machines, enabling energy to be instantly diverted to where it's needed. This will significantly reduce reliance on inefficient, fossil fuel driven and expensive peaker plants. So this brings us to our second key takeaway, that Bitcoin mining has rapid demand response. Adding renewables to the grid. So solar and wind are variable renewable energy sources, VRE, and adding VRE to the grid gets exponentially more difficult to load balance. This is because VRE sources are unpredictable, which often leads to supply and demand mismatch. It's a fluctuation between too much power being produced and wasted, or not enough power being produced to meet demand at a particular time. In 2020, VRE accounted for 9% of global energy generation. However, the International Energy Agency's net zero roadmap has indicated that VRE will need to reach 70% by 2050. So this is quite the gulf that we need to reach in that time. Bitcoin miners can partner with VRE energy producers to absorb some of that excess power and dial down machines during troughs. So miners coupled with battery storage, one, incentivizes the additional build out of VRE, and two, monetizes excess energy, which will reduce the energy cost for retail consumers. And this brings us to our final key takeaway, that Bitcoin miners are flexible customers. So energy can account for 90 to 95% of a Bitcoin mining company's overheads. And so they are highly incentivized to construct and add renewable energy into a grid that wouldn't previously have been there. Renewablox is planning to construct a 10 megawatt solar farm in Costa Rica, in the Guanacaste province here. And that will be co-located with a Bitcoin mining operation and battery storage as well. We can optimize the solar power to make sure none is being wasted, with some being sent to the grid, some to battery storage, and some to Bitcoin mining all in an optimized fashion. So owning this renewable energy source for us, 1, eliminates a significant portion of our overheads, 2, provides an additional revenue stream and thus mitigates risk on our part as well. And it will also enable Costa Rica to even further export renewable energy to the neighboring countries of Nicaragua and Panama, respectively. This is our team here that will achieve this. 4 of us are based in the UK, Jake and Alexander in the US, and we also have 2 Costa Rican based partners as well. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Callum. Very, very interesting and lots of good arguments I personally haven't heard before. So that was interesting. I don't know if we can actually take one question. There's one here from Jake. What incentivizes companies to spend significant capital on Bitcoin mining equipment to help stabilize the grids?
Well, the incentive is through Bitcoin as monetary value. If you have a grid tie, then you'll always be able to sell power to the grid. But as I touched on in the presentation, the grid can't always take that power. And so when you're looking at the numbers in the initial CapEx justification, then if some of that power has been wasted and not all of it's been sold, then it's more difficult to justify building out renewable energy. So if you couple Bitcoin mining with renewable energy, it makes more monetary sense.
Yep. Thank you for that. Okay, so I actually don't think we have that much more time right now, but if you have any questions for Callum, feel free to put them into the chat and we can take them at the panel discussion at the end. And also just generally speaking, if you have any questions for the panelists at the end, feel free to post them in the Q&A. Once again, thank you, Callum.
Thanks.
See you in a bit at the Fireside Chat. Okay, so next presenter is Claus Skaaning, once again. And Claus, as you probably already know, is the CEO of DigiShares, and he'll now be speaking about DigiShares and the ESG of tokenization. So once again, welcome, Claus.
Thank you. I've learned a lot of new stuff today, and really been exciting to hear the speakers. So some of my presentation has been not invalidated, but is become unnecessary, I would say, to go through. Let me see if I can figure out how to share. You should see my screen now. So my presentation is basically a mix of the work that was done so excellently by Claudia's group at the USC, and also of a report that was issued by Pantera Capital some time ago, trying to argue that while the E may not be so good for blockchain, we make it up in the S and G, and possibly, as Callum has argued, we can also do quite good in the E section. I've sort of tried to list the different areas where the blockchain industry as a whole can make contributions to ESG in these slides based on the previously mentioned sources. Bitcoin is an area that is often criticized a lot, and in fact, it's largely unfair, as Callum has described. Bitcoin mining can be used to push and drive renewables, and as Callum has explained, can actually provide quite a lot of assistance to environmental improvement globally. Also, of course, this week, or was it last week, we saw Ethereum migrate over to proof of stake, which is, I think, as it was treated, potentially a reduction in global energy spending around 0.2%, so quite significant. And the entire blockchain space should now be around 57% of all transactions should be on proof of stake rather than proof of work. So it's improving all the time. And it's also important to compare blockchain and proof of stake based financial systems with the existing financial industry, right? Which I'm sure will be much less energy demanding than the banking system and so on that we see today. Tokenization, that as we are doing it, we can choose to primarily use proof of stake, protocols, and this will in fact be the case in the future, I think, because currently 95% of all tokenization occurs on Ethereum, which is now proof of stake. So we will not spend a lot of energy compared to the traditional financial industry. On the social element, there is a lot of benefit just by in Bitcoin itself. A lot of people are using Bitcoin to improve their local financial situation. It's especially useful for non-bank people, giving them control over their own savings and allowing them to use quite sophisticated financial products that are normally only available to people with a bank account. Remittance also saves a lot of people a lot of money, as we can see here with the examples from people transferring funds from US to Mexico. And then, of course, it's easy to see, and we can see it quite often. The adoption of Bitcoin and digital assets is much higher in countries where there's a lot of inflation. In Turkey, for instance, where we have seen huge inflation this year and last year, the Bitcoin adoption has increased much more than in or low inflationary countries. Then there's countries with capital controls, such as Russia, where crypto also can be used to allow people to export their funding when they leave the country. Within tokenization, this is probably the space where we can do the most benefit, I would argue, due to the fact that we can fractionalize and democratize the access to real-world assets, and in fact, as Claudia went into as well, we can hopefully create equal opportunity access to wealth for every member of society, even poor people, people in emerging countries, and so on, can get access to invest into real-world assets, and in that way, hopefully improve their local or their personal financial situation. So this is, I think, the great promise of tokenization, that we can assist in closing the wealth gap globally, and I think this is what's part of our vision. Finally, on governance, we can also do a lot. The blockchain vision, as it was originally formulated, has a lot to do with transparency, accountability, disclosure, and so on. Everything is locked on the blockchain, and it forces companies to be much more open about their business and their money flows and so on, compared to the old days. Everything can be tracked and audited. It's much more safe from human errors, and it's even corruption in itself will become harder to do, because there is an increased visibility and trackability generally about financial information. Smart contracts are open source, and the transactions are often visible to the public. So things should really improve quite a lot also in that area, as enabled by blockchain technology. And of course, tokenization itself will inherit these benefits from the general blockchain market. From a DigiShares perspective, as also we've been working with Claudia's group, is to try to formulate a strategy in this space. And of course, there's a lot we can do, and we can of course promote the use of proof of stake protocols. That's become much easier now, I would say, since last week. We can also develop functionality to allow our clients to focus more on green certified buildings and projects and so on, and try to push that as a way forward. Then we can also, of course, promote democratization and community engagement in all the projects that we work on. And this is also relatively easy, I would say, because a lot of the clients we work with actually find this to be extremely important. They have the same ideals. And then we could also, longer term, sort of try to help financial literacy globally by making it easier to use the system here, and to creating understanding and basically educate about the availability of investment into real world assets. On the governance side, and this is also a focus for us, sort of to keep developing our systems and our infrastructure so that it's more and more transparent and sort of easy to see what goes on, and everything can be tracked to be of benefit for the public, for the government, the taxation and auditing and so on. And then of course we can also try to influence the industry and moving in the right direction. So that's definitely what we would like to help push going forward. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Klaus. I don't know if any of you have any questions. If so, you can type it into the chat now. Once again, I of course invite you to write in the chat questions for the panel. I saw there's one here, which actually also Peter just responded to. It's not specifically ESG related, but I think while we do have some time, I think you can probably answer this question, Klaus. David here asked if it's better to digitize fractions of real estate or the shares in an SPV that would own the real estate.
That's a great question. I would say it's actually, right now I would argue that it's impossible to directly tokenize fractions of real estate, since you'd be tokenizing the title of the deed, and you'd have to integrate with the land title registry, and we haven't actually seen any real examples of that being done globally because they are not digitized yet. So it's relatively easy to answer the question. Right now, I as far as I know, and I have a pretty good overview of the global industry, the only way forward to do it is, the only way that's legally possible right now is to tokenize the shares of an SPV, as opposed to directly tokenizing the title of the deed, because it simply isn't legally possible anywhere globally, as far as I know. I think there may be some experiments, there's some POCs going on, but it's not done to any large degree yet. So we tokenize the shares of the SPV or bonds or some kind of revenue share or profit share or something like that, but not the title directly. The other thing I would argue is that if you allow investors to buy shares, you work with a sort of a well-known, recognized financial infrastructure, which is the entire securities legislation around shares. So there's a lot of legal protection, a lot of consumer protection, and so on, investor protection built into the concept of shares, minority protection, and so on. If you rather sort of allow them to invest directly into some kind of structure, legal structure around the title of the deed, you have to build that yourself, create some kind of investment contract, and regulate how appreciation and distribution and so on should be carried out. And that would be difficult, I think, for many, especially retail investors, to understand. So yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you for that. So I think there's no more questions right now. So I think we will move on to the last presenter of today. Once again, thank you, Klaus. So today's last presenter is Morne Olivier, who's the CEO at Green Carbon Token. And Morne is the founder of Business to Blockchain Incubator Consulting Services. And he also recently partnered with Bridge DeFi to develop the Green Carbon Token and took up a position at Bridge DeFi as their new business development specialist. The goal is to bridge the gap within decentralized finance and develop Web3 blockchain solutions that matter. And now Morne will talk about the Green Carbon Token. So if you're there, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, DigiShares, for the invite. And yeah, from what I've seen, from what I've heard now from Klaus and from Andrew, they covered quite a bit of detail for me. So I think I'm going to keep it short and just take you through the presentation. There you go. All right, so yeah, I'm Morne from Green Carbon Token, and today I just want to give you an overview of how we intend to tokenize green bonds and carbon credits. Let's see I can take that away. There you go. Okay. So the market, the carbon emission market, okay, a lot has been covered with the previous presentations, but I'll quickly just go through this. So on the left, you can see from the graph that carbon emissions is really, you know, it's still very much a problem. And yeah, well, globally, we are looking for solutions. From our side, we believe that blockchain solutions are the way forward because of its efficiencies and transparency. The world's been given green bonds and carbon credits as financial vehicles to try and assist with the mission, but to date, yeah, I don't think it's worked as well as it could on chain. So from green carbon token side, we want to tokenize green bonds and carbon credits. Our initial phase 1 would see green bonds being tokenized, and in that process, we would be onboarding investment or the projects that's doing the environmental impact and investors that want to invest in them, as the green bonds are investment vehicles. With tokenizing that process, we bring the blockchain efficiency to the foreground. And like the previous presenters have said, you know, the transparency on the ledger, the efficiency, the lower cost entry, all of those aspects play a big role in what efficiency we can bring to that market. We will be looking at phase 2 and 3 to develop the carbon credit side, which will be more in line with the private market. And then with that, having a larger participation in the platform. Both instruments or both sides will be packaged and molded into a marketplace that we are designing, and the main aspect of that would be to have a low easy entry for everybody to participate in that value. Okay, so as Andrew mentioned, the data aggregation of all of this coming into a platform is very important. It makes the decision-making for GPs and LPs very important. You know, from an investment perspective, they'll be able to make quick decisions with live data. This data on chain is verified and can be certified by the chain, so that there is no other question on the data. And this is one of our, I think, one of our end goals is to showcase that and make that as impactful as possible for people to realize. One, that the source where it's coming from is true, and two, how they are presenting and doing their work going forward. I do believe that once our blockchain platforms are starting to take shape and go forward with various corporations and companies and individuals, we will see individual profiles, company profiles, not being able to do business without their green focused side of the company. And hence, a decision that we all will have to make would be which software or which blockchains to use. We had the fortunate milestone last week where Ethereum went to proof of stake, dropping its consumption by 99.95%. And that's a massive drop and a massive milestone for the blockchain industry. We will, of course, advise our clients to do similar investigations to us, and using blockchain platforms like Ethereum that is now seen as a green blockchain. there are obviously other ones, and I think I would say most of them are trying to be as efficient as possible. But I do also see that they would be scrutinized and would have to have that benchmark pushed on, so that they can be more efficient, especially more efficient than banking systems and some of the current software that we have. This public image will drive, I think, further blockchain adoption and innovation for the private market to realize. I think a lot of the younger generation is looking towards new technology in being efficient and how they present themselves. And I think it would be very important going forward. So the green carbon token really wants to present itself as a blockchain that allows easy access with cost-effective participation for everyone. I could not read that because that's so true. That's what we want to achieve with our platform, and open up to a larger market to engage and assist in climate change. I think we can see it with the Eastern countries where they've opened up to private markets, like Vietnam with their solar empowerment, where just the way they administrated it, it's just massive in how they've scaled that opportunity, where the Western side is still very closed and difficult. So for us to open up a platform like the Carbon Green Token to a larger segment of the private market, with the blockchain integrity that we can represent, I think installs a lot of integrity for us going forward. And then, of course, lastly, this is not possible without collaboration and network. And yeah, today I just want to again proudly announce that we are collaborating and partnering with DigiShares and Bridge2Fi to develop the green carbon token and take climate action, climate change and sustainability forward into the next few decades. All right. And that's me. I'll just take my screen off.
Yeah, thank you for that, Morne. And very much looking forward to be working with you on this exciting project. Okay, so Morne was today's last presenter. Thank you for all to all the presenters. And now it's time for all of you who have been on the stage to join me for the panel discussion. And we have received a few questions, but if you have any questions for the panelists, feel free to type them into the Q&A now. Yeah, so to all the presenters, could you join the stage? Simply unmute yourselves and turn off the camera. Thank you so much for that. Okay, I think the first place I want to start is simply, we heard both from Morne and Claus that we now have transitioned into this proof of stake with the merge Ethereum. And I would like to know, Callum, what your view is on that. Is it, does it indeed bring us towards a more green future, or would it slow down investments into more sustainable sources of energy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know some ESG VCs that would definitely disagree there, that have been tweeting out that the transition for Ethereum to proof of stake could actually be a net negative for the environment through its lack of ever being able to go carbon negative, or like, as you said, reducing the incentive for investments in that area. Proof of stake isn't completely net zero, but it has significantly reduced the energy use of the consensus for now. So it is hard to argue that it's not been a good transition for the environment initially. I think it's just the potential that proof of work has for carbon negative. It's quite exciting, actually.
Yeah, interesting. And I don't know if any of you have anything to add. It might be a bit out of your area of knowledge, but feel free to add if so. But otherwise, I'll just read out loud a question here from Eric. And he asks if you can explain the impact of tokenization in comparison to the current financial markets in terms of ESG. And I saw that you, Claudia, already answered to that question online. So I think if you could start out, simply just briefly summarize what you wrote to Eric.
Sure, I would be happy to. Yeah, my first point was that obviously it's hard to generalize both of the industry in total, but that especially for tokenization, it seems very interesting to look at the social component. And we talked a little bit about that, to grant access and to lower the burden of entry with financial markets. We obviously know that for a lot of people, those are not available. So same for real estate or other assets, maybe, just to lower the burden, seems to be a very interesting component of the social part of ESG. And then again, I mean, for E and G, it will very much depend on what companies are doing. So we talked a lot about the E component, and I think we have some experts on that. But also when you look into the financial markets, it's a question of how do they invest their revenue. And we do see some changes, or I recently read a lot about that, but I think that's will be to be seen in the future, how tokenization is moving forward with that, and also the financial market. But it's definitely interesting, the comparison.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I don't know if any of you have anything to add, but we did briefly touch, or we have touched upon how blockchain can help ESG. For example, I don't know, Conor, you mentioned also the ETF you had done previously. Could you maybe elaborate a bit on, not necessarily only tokenization, but just blockchain in general, how it can, how it plays out in relation to ESG?
Well, it's playing out, I think, is the way to put it. And up until this point, you know, in a traditional sense, so I built a traditional ESG ETF many years ago, trades today, that you're just using data. And I think blockchain, and in many different applications as we see, makes something really come to life. And in this case, makes an investment portfolio, which, yes, people want it to grow, but when you kind of go through the ins and outs of how it's sustainable, it does get lost, multiple companies, all of this stuff. What doesn't get lost is that if you're able to generate a return and then subsequently offset your emissions in a very systematic and clear way, that also, as Drew pointed out, can be data rich in terms of the information. And I think what that highlights, and it, at least as it relates to blockchain going forward, is that being able to systematically develop a solution that both creates the change I think everybody on this call wants, but importantly, because it is a product, and in financial products, one big thing that maybe a lot of people on this call aren't as familiar with is that it really takes about 3 years for a financial product like an ETF or mutual fund or whatever you're familiar with to get enough time under its belt to be able to be in your retirement account. There is no investment fund that you can create that it needs to have a 3-year track record in order, and many other things, and that's where these products move from the retail enthusiast, the early adopter that we're all probably talking to the masses. And I think the ease in which this solution, and over time, people may not even know they're doing it, which actually would be the best result, is that if people are offsetting their emissions without even knowing it because the cost is so minimal, that's a fantastic result.
Absolutely. And of course, everyone, if you have anything, feel free to tip in. Noah, could you maybe also just briefly touch upon how blockchain tokenization can impact ESG in emerging markets relative to legacy financial markets?
Okay, thanks. And a lot of great information has been shared already. Maybe I can speak to the topic that was initially started and the one that we're working on with DigiShares on real estate. The component of ESG, the social component of ESG, tokenization is able to unlock a lot of tied up capital with people who cannot participate in the traditional real estate industry. And so here in Africa, especially in Uganda, anyone playing in the real estate, you have to go through the traditional financial ecosystem because, just because of the capex involved in, building a property, whether it's at a personal level, as opposed to developed countries where the developers put up estates. Here it's largely individuals. You buy your land, you get an architect, you build your house, and most likely it's from a loan, and that loan is at an interest rate, and that's for personal purposes. But then for commercial purposes, there is almost no way of avoiding, traditional real estate loans, and these are with interest rates, above 15, 16%, and that, for real estate investment is very high, and what tokenization can do, for commercial properties is that it can, sort of crowdsource other capital that is tied up within, lower income communities that are still interested in gaining return on real estate. And so what that does simultaneously is that democratizes access to capital while reducing, the cost of that capital, because now people are invested in the long term. So getting 2,000, 10,000 investors who are very patient on ROI for real estate as opposed to a commercial bank, the numbers will speak for themselves. So in terms of impact to ESG, the social part, tokenization unlocks opportunities for ordinary folk to start participating in the real estate industry. And then that can cascade to to other different areas, the carbon industry, the bond markets, etc. So just getting more people involved in the economy is a very key thing that we're looking at on the continent. And so that's being unlocked by blockchain.
Thank you for that. And you just briefly mentioned carbon, and Morne, I think maybe what has been enabled with blockchain that was not possible with traditional financial infrastructure?
Okay, so particularly here, because, and someone had asked a question which Claus answered about whether you're tokenizing the real estate property itself or the shareholding of an SPV. And just that alone is something that traditional financial rails have not been able to do in Africa. It might be different, the story might be different in more developed economies, but here it's impossible. You can't crowdsource at that level. I know for regulation purposes, you can't have an investor, by law, you can't have more than 100 investors in an SPV by one of our laws here, meaning that you're limited. Even if you're trying to crowdsource, you're limited. And so the real estate developers have to either be very creative in the way they structure, their SPVs. So you find that you're building an apartment block with, say, 5 blocks, and then each block is a different SPV, yet it's the same development, all because you're trying to get as many people involved in the investment. And so that structurally is not been possible. But then when you tokenize an entire opportunity, then it's a relationship between the SPV and its investors. And in speaking to that, that's also something that our regulators are very interested in. Actually, our capital markets regulator is signed up on the projects as an advisor because they're very keen to see how this can unlock, this potential investment. So blockchain specifically allows for that fractional distribution of value amongst many stakeholders, which by law and by infrastructure is not currently possible.
Thank you.
To that note, even as an add-on, like the lowest hanging fruit I see for this is that we had a client before called TreeBR, and they're basically a tokenized carbon credit, just a tokenized carbon credit that's verified by whatever amount of land was initially audited essentially and verified, and then all proceeds from the TreeBR tokens go back to the original landowners to continue maintaining and maybe even adding to that plot and that was listed on Merge, and I believe it's listing on a couple other platforms in the near future, maybe quarter 4, quarter 1 or 2 of next year. So that's also projects that I see a lot of, just tokenizing raw carbon credits and either making them as an add-on with a security token, or just like we're saying over here, Noah, if you're financing and you want to hold X amount of carbon credits that you can then retire in the future, or probably more likely will gain a financial value that's increasing as demand for that, increase over the coming years. So that's also an interesting angle. And to go back to the blockchain, that's also tough to do without having a verifiable ledger on both sides. And that's really, I guess, the value add of doing that.
Yeah, exactly, Peter. That's 100%. 100%. It's also can be seen as a safer investment vehicle, because you actually fundamentally doing something, and it ties into an asset or assets, land or whatever. So yeah, definitely, I think from a larger participation in the broader public, I think it's a very attractive one that will be much, it's much better than a token or trying to go and speculate.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so there's another question here in relation to ESG and DAOs, and I think that if Andrew, I think that's probably for you, and it doesn't elaborate too much on the question, but I think it would be good to know how exactly DAOs relates to ESG, and also maybe how you make sure that you actually align the interests of the investors, and especially in terms of environmental purposes, and that it doesn't get driven out by profit-seeking entities that doesn't care about the environment. How do you make sure that all of this aligns in a DAO?
Sure, yeah, happy to jump in on that. So actually, Vitalik Buterin wrote a blog recently on, when does a DAO really make sense, that I think is quite relevant to this question. And actually, we just wrote a bit about this because there's a lot going on in the carbon space. We're talking to different carbon registries and so on about using blockchain. And this question has come up, right? And on one side, decentralization is really important because it creates credible fairness. So when you're talking about a DAO that's helping build, let's say, basic infrastructure for a market, like KlimaDAO is when it comes to the on-chain carbon market, then traits like predictability or the robustness, of the entity, its neutrality, et cetera, are generally valued above, let's say, something like efficiency, where if you have a more hierarchical company structure, that could be advantageous. So when you're talking about the infrastructure point of view, a decentralized organization makes sense. The other piece is that when you have a DAO, Vitalik cites that, generally they excel in what's called a concave environment. So that's where when you have to have, certain forms of compromise, and let's say the average of decisions are likely to outperform the types of focus that may come from centralization. And when you're talking about the carbon market, again, there's so many different stakeholders involved. There's, different entities in various countries. You have the industry bodies and so on. When you have a DAO, you can have a structure where you bring in all those insights from everybody. And like I said, KlimaDAO itself has over 60,000 members, and increasingly have members, that didn't know about Web3 at all, but are coming from the carbon market side. So I think those two areas, the decision-making aspect and being able to pull in information together, and then also the fairness side, which I think is really important when you're talking about building infrastructure that's going to be used by different types of entities, right? Those are the two key pieces there. And I think that's why, from the ESG point of view of the carbon market, a DAO makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, fully agreed. Okay, so I think actually we'll just end today with a question that goes out to all of you. And it's simply, if you can mention one or two things about blockchain, if you can do about tokenization, that would be great. But blockchain in general, and how it can help, or how it most importantly relates to ESG. And I think I'll just ask each of you. So maybe Morne, if you could start out.
Well, really the participation and the efficiency of things. Like I said, we want to open up to the private market, to the citizen on the street. Everyone should be comfortable enough to approach a platform and invest in an environmentally sound impact project. Everybody should be able to come on board and say, you know, I want to trade carbon credits because, you know, my company has done X amount of good and I've got excess left, but it shouldn't be secluded. It shouldn't be unregulated. It should be on a ledger where everybody can view that transparency. So yeah, participation, fractionalization, efficiency, all those blockchain words that we that we use every day. This is really that's what it is.
Thank you. And Callum, what do you think are the core attributes of blockchain when it comes to ESG?
I think it'll be echoing that actually. Kind of the decentralization aspect is key. For us, our collaboration with DigiShares will enable retail investors the opportunity to invest in not only a Bitcoin mining farm, but potentially ESG potential as well. So again, through tokenization and fractionalization, it's giving more opportunity to retail where it would have previously been excluded. So that's one main benefit, I think, for us.
Yep. Thank you for that. Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on like the efficiency point with blockchain and everything. Access, I think in some ways people view this as like democratizing access to certain markets. We talked about real estate a bunch, you know, in the various presentations. So I think like when you fractionalize real estate, you can break it down into a unit that maybe is financially more accessible to certain groups. So you're democratizing access to real estate ownership in that case. And the same could be said about the carbon market, either when it's just accessing you know, carbon assets themselves, but you know, there's also the outlook of fractionalizing carbon projects themselves, right? So you can actually own the project and then get streamed in the carbon credits as they're generated from that project. So I think it's it's leveraging the technology to basically democratize it, increase its access, and that's quite a powerful thing.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, there's a risk of us simply repeating, echoing the same things, but just for good measure, Peter, what do you think?
Sure. I think the transparency and the ability to just simply upload and document processes. So look at things even on like a real estate offering side, just real estate straight up. You could upload rent rolls, you could upload growth projections, you could upload pro formas, you could upload tax assessments, everything to the blockchain. Not that everything is necessary for an investment to happen, but the more you can provide, I feel, at least in this market specifically and going forward, the more info you can provide to your investors and to your LPs and to anyone you're dealing with, probably the better. From an ESG component, the more you can map out how you're being compliant or how you're going above and beyond, how you're accounting for some factor that whatever ESG governing body may be kind of enforcing, or whoever you're dealing with. The better it'll bode for you, especially if you're trying to paint yourself in a pro ESG light. That's a very important piece. So even just being able to upload things to the blockchain and share that on a two-sided road, if you will, I think that's a pretty key component of it as a whole.
Yeah, fully agreed. Noah, what's your view?
Okay, running the risk of sounding a broken record. It's the same stuff. Participation, efficiency, transparency. Maybe just add, but a combination of these lead to trust, and the trust is a core component of governance. And so the G in ESG is pronounced well through blockchain. Just even to stay away from the carbon real estate, or speaking to some of the projects that we've been part of, where we have been able to increase efficiency of a regulatory function. I think that also, adds to some transparency and governance. Whether it's in the telecom sector or in the taxes sector. And so we are seeing these advantages spanning beyond, and someone mentioned it already, spanning beyond just the carbon markets, spanning beyond just the real estate markets, but the same benefits being exercised in many, many other areas. And so just being able to enable the entities that we entrust for governance to be more transparent so that we can trust them better.
Absolutely. Okay, let's just take the two last speakers. Conor.
I guess without repeating it, it's really, as I sort of said, blockchain gives, I guess, our group the ability to overcome the hurdles of adoption for ESG products. And one of the things is delighting people. And I think that what you're seeing, we talked about it, the efficiency to do something that otherwise is just not possible in the traditional sense, but still is what someone wants to do. And being able to develop narratives and have the data behind it and really make that come alive, that allows this little segment to catapult beyond the traditional sense and it not be a, us versus them, just this is better and you can adopt these things. So it's really exciting. And all this has happened really quickly. I mean, really, I know a lot of people have been in this a long time, but even the amount of time you've been in this is really quickly relative to the financial markets. So, it's exciting time and clearly a lot of good stuff is happening.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for that. And then Claudia, you have the great honor of being the last one. It's a tough task to come up with something that hasn't already been mentioned, but what's your view?
I would definitely say community. I feel like blockchain is definitely capturing a societal change and that people want to are interested in finding new ways. And I think thinking about sustainability and ESG has a lot to do with being agile and adapting to change. And I feel like that's something that the community there is definitely able of doing. And that's what I think is very interesting in that aspect.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, so we are out of time. So that's today's webinar. Thank you so much to all the great panelists and presenters. It was good to have you. Also thank you to the audience. If you have any questions that didn't get answered, I believe most of today's presenters can be found on social media. You can try to reach out to them on LinkedIn, Twitter, or other social platforms. Lastly, I just want to say thank you to all who attended the webinar, you, the audience, and also thank you to the great tech team at DigiShares and the moderators for helping making this webinar possible. I hope to see you all in a month's time when we're doing another webinar, this time on tokenization of debt. See you all soon. Bye.